Project Definition Document. One of the most important items you'll create each time that you work on a project is your project definition document. What this is the legal agreement between all parties as to what is in the project, what is outside the project, how the project is going to be focused, and it just puts everybody on the same page. In my textbook, it's on page 46, the required elements, and page 47, but depending upon the version that you're using or the edition that you're using, you may be a slightly different page number, but the process and the items are still the same. In this sample project that we're going to be working on, we're looking at making sandwiches. So let's walk through the project definition document using this as our example. The first thing we're going to look at is the purpose, and that's the overarching purpose, the why are we doing this project. In this case, we're creating lunch sandwiches for meeting participants. That's an overarching reason. Then you get into the goals and objectives, and those are the measurable items that you need to be able to accomplish in order to succeed with the project. In this case, we're going to create 12 sandwiches. 4 will be peanut butter jelly, 4 will be peanut butter banana, and 4 will be ham and Swiss. We'll be delivering them to the lunchbox assemblers by 11:30. We'll be successful because we'll know that we've created high quality sandwiches and we'll deliver them within the time allotted. Project context is how the project relates to the bigger picture. So in this case, we know that the meeting participants are eating lunch during a work session. So the sandwiches that are chosen, the support materials that are chosen, are all things that they can eat while they're talking. They wouldn't have messy ribs or something like that that would impede their ability to communicate. And we also know that they're going to have an Italian dinner buffet. So as we're looking at making the lunch food, we want to avoid having Italian food for lunch. Project dependencies, well, those are things that could affect the successful outcome. And in this case, well, our bread oven has been temperamental. Doesn't always work right. And if it doesn't work properly, it may be impossible to meet the lunch deadline. So we're counting on the bread oven to hang in there. We also need to make sure that there's enough time in our sandwich making schedule to complete 12 sandwiches. It may take a while, and we don't know how many other orders, and we need to find that out before we make a promise that we want to be able to make sure we can keep. Scope specifications, well, these are the things that directly apply. What is within the scope of our project? For scope specifications, these are the things that are specifically within the scope of our project. We're going to be making sandwiches. Out of scope specifications are things that are not part of our project. In this case, we're not in charge of apples, cookies, or chips. We're not even in charge of putting lunch boxes together. All of that is outside the scope of this project. We're simply making sandwiches and moving on. Think of Subway. You have someone that meets with you and works with you to make your sandwich, then they hand you off to someone else to finish your lunch. So it might be something along those lines. Assumptions are things that you can, assume. And it helps to clearly define what work will be performed within the project. In this case, we assume that the products used that we'll need in order to make the sandwich will be available, that we're not going to have to stop what we're doing and run to the store. With constraints, it's any factor that could limit the options available to the project. For example, we may not receive payment if someone doesn't get written approval from the meeting coordinator. Another constraint might be that there are no clean knives, so that would affect the options available to the project. We'd have to use spoons, and that might be difficult. Next section is risks. You want to think about risks before they could possibly happen so that you can address them and mitigate anything that could go on with them whenever possible. This doesn't mean that you're going to address every risk that's out there. You're just looking for some of the most common. For example, there's always the risk that someone could cut oneself with a knife. By having chefs go through basic knife safety training, that is less likely to happen. Probably also save you some money on your insurance. Another risk, if you use a knife that isn't clean, you might get peanut butter transferred into this ham sandwich. So, In order to make sure that that doesn't happen, you're going to use a clean knife when spreading mayonnaise on the ham sandwich. Simple enough. Next area is stakeholders. And there's primary and secondary stakeholders. Right now I've just listed primary stakeholders. In this case, our meeting participants, meeting coordinator, sandwich chefs, and box lunch assemblers. Then the final step is to recommend an approach for completion of the project. Now, after checking to see how much time and how many other sandwiches are in the schedule, you may need to subcontract someone else to make the sandwiches. You may need to make an adjustment as to what goes in the sandwiches depending upon the products that you have in stock. So those kinds of things need to be considered before you make your recommended approach. In this case, you've looked at the subcontracting, it isn't necessary, and you've decided that you will make the sandwiches. Once you have all the pieces in your PDD, or your project definition document, in place, then you get stakeholder approval. Now in this case, you wouldn't go through and get every meeting participant, every sandwich chef, every lunchbox assembler's approval. You would have a designated person, in this case the meeting coordinator, who would sign off on the project definition document so that everyone is on the same page. These are the kinds of sandwiches we're going to be making. This is the deadline for delivery, and this is how we're going to get through the project.